Howard Nima of We Are Change Connecticut, wearechangect.org, and this is Truth Talk News. Those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Past presidents of the United States and other high-profile political figures have repeatedly issued warnings that the United States government is under the control of an invisible government, owing no allegiance and acknowledging no responsibility to the people. According to 6 of our former presidents, 1 vice president, and a myriad of other high-profile political leaders, an invisible government that is incredibly evil in intent has been in control of the U.S. government ever since the days of Andrew Jackson, since at least 1836. They virtually run the United States government for their own selfish purposes. They control both parties, operating under a cover of self-created screen. Executive officers, legislative bodies, schools, courts, newspapers, and every agency created for the public protection has been infiltrated by these interlopers. As a result, we have come to be one of the worst ruled, one of the most completely controlled and dominated governments in the civilized world, no longer a government by conviction and the vote of the majority, but a government by the opinion and the duress of small groups of dominant men. Woodrow Wilson. On October 24, 1798, George Washington wrote, "It was not my intention to doubt that the doctrines of the Illuminati and the principles of Jacobinism had not spread in the United States. On the contrary, no one is more truly satisfied of this fact than I am." Thomas Jefferson, in a letter to John Taylor on May 28, 1816, wrote, "I sincerely believe with you that banking establishments are more dangerous than standing armies. A power has risen up in the government greater than the people themselves, consisting of many and various powerful interests, combined in one mass and held together by the cohesive power of the vast surplus in banks." John C. Calhoun, Vice President and U.S. Senator, from a speech given on May 27, 1836. Note that it appears that Washington and Jefferson's concerns regarding bankers and the separation of people from government was realized by 1836. The fact was confirmed in a letter written by FDR in 1933, in which he wrote that a financial element in the large centers has owned the government ever since the days of Andrew Jackson. Jackson was the 7th president of the United States, serving from 1829 through 1837. Calhoun served as Jackson's vice president from 1829 to 1832. In Theodore Roosevelt, an autobiography, Roosevelt wrote, "Behind the ostensible government sits enthroned an invisible government, owing no allegiance and acknowledging no responsibility to the people. To destroy this invisible government, to befoul the unholy alliance between corrupt business and corrupt politics, is the first task of the statesmanship of the day." A great industrial nation is controlled by its system of credit. Our system of credit is privately concentrated. The growth of a nation, therefore, and all of our activities are in the hands of a few men. Since I entered politics, I have chiefly had men's views confided to me privately. Some of the biggest men in the United States in the field of commerce and manufacture are afraid of something. They know that there is a power somewhere so organized, so subtle, so watchful, so interlocked, so complete, so pervasive, that they'd better not speak above their breath when they speak in condemnation of it. Woodrow Wilson, New Freedom, 1913. The real menace of our republic is the invisible government, which, like a giant octopus, sprawls its slimy legs over our city, states, and nation. The little coterie of powerful international bankers virtually run the United States government for their own selfish purpose. They practically control both parties and control the majority of the newspapers and magazines in this country. They use these columns of these papers to club into submission or drive out of office public officials who refuse to do the bidding of the powerful corrupt cliques which compose the invisible government. It operates under cover of a self-created screen and seizes our executive officers, legislative bodies, schools, courts, newspapers, and every agency created for the public protection. New York City Mayor John F. Hyland in the New York Times, March 26, 1922. Congressman Louis T. McFadden delivered a speech to the House of Representatives on June 10, 1932, and I quote, "Mr. Chairman, we have in this country one of the most corrupt institutions the world has ever known. I refer to the Federal Reserve Board and the Federal Reserve Banks. The Federal Reserve Board, a government board, has cheated the government of the United States and the people of the United States out of enough money to pay the national debt. Mr. Chairman, when the Federal Reserve Act was passed, the people of the United States did not perceive that a world system was being set up here, and that this country was to supply financial power to an international superstate, a superstate controlled by international bankers and international industrialists, acting together to enslave the world for their own pleasure." As stated earlier, in a letter to Colonel Edward Mandell House, dated November 21, 1933, and as quoted in FDR's personal letters from 1928 through 1945, FDR wrote, and I quote, "The real truth of the matter is, as you and I know, that a financial element in the large centers has owned the government ever since the days of Andrew Jackson. Today, the path to total dictatorship in the United States can be laid by strictly legal means. We have a well-organized political action group in this country, determined to destroy our Constitution and establish a one-party state. It operates secretly, silently, continuously to transform our government. This ruthless, power-seeking elite is a disease of our country. This group is answerable neither to the President, the Senate, nor the courts. It is practically irremovable." Senator William Jenner, in a speech from 1954. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are a people who are inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths and secret proceedings. Our way of life is under attack. Those who make themselves our enemies are advancing around the globe. No war ever posed a greater threat to our security. If you are waiting to find of a clear and present danger, then I can say that the danger has never been more, and it has never been more present, and it has never been more imminent. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. JFK, from a speech delivered to the American Newspaper Publishers Association on April 27, 1961, known as the Secret Society speech. The Rockefellers and their allies have, for at least 50 years, been carefully following a plan to use their economic power to gain political control of first America and then the rest of the world. Do I mean conspiracy? Yes, I do. I am convinced there is such a plot, international in scope, generations old in planning, and incredibly evil in intent. Congressman Larry P. McDonald, November 1975, from the introduction to a book titled The Rockefeller File by Gary Allen. There exists a shadowy government with its own Air Force, its own Navy, its own fundraising mechanism, and the ability to pursue its own ideas of national interest, free from all checks and balances and free from the law itself. Daniel K. Inouye, U.S. Senator from Hawaii, testimony at the Iran-Contra hearings in 1986. A power has risen up in government greater than the people themselves, the Federal Reserve. In an interview with Jim Lehrer that aired on PBS NewsHour on September 18, 2007, former Federal Reserve Chairman Alan Greenspan said essentially that the Federal Reserve was above the law.
Well, first of all, the Federal Reserve is an independent agency, and that means basically that there is no other agency of government which can overrule actions.
And no agency of government can overrule their actions. The Rockefellers and their allies have, for at least 50 years, been carefully following a plan to use their economic power to gain political control of first America and then the rest of the world. Congressman Larry P. McDonald, 1975. In 1921, the stockholders of the Federal Reserve Crime Syndicate financed an organization called the Council on Foreign Relations. Suffice it to say that the CFR plays a prominent role in the invisible government. The CFR is the arm of the ruling elite in the United States to its counterpart, the Royal Institute of International Affairs in London. Most influential politicians, academics, and media personalities are members. The CFR uses its influence to push their New World Order agenda on the American people. David Rockefeller is the current patriarch of the Rockefeller family, the only surviving grandchild of oil tycoon John D. Rockefeller, founder of Standard Oil. Rockefeller began a lifelong association with the CFR when he joined as a director in 1949. In Rockefeller's own 2002 autobiography Memoirs, he wrote, "For more than a century, ideological extremists at either end of the political spectrum have seized upon well-publicized incidents such as my encounter with Castro to attack the Rockefeller family for the inordinate influence they claim we wield over American political and economic institutions. Some even believe we're part of a secret cabal working against the best interests of the United States, characterizing my family and me as internationalists, and of conspiring with others around the world to build a more integrated global political and economic structure. One world, if you will. If that's the charge, I stand guilty, and I am proud of it." That's right, collectivist David Rockefeller, the man behind Richard Nixon's opening the doors to communist China, which meant opening the doors to Chase, Exxon, and Mobil, and the beginning of the great deindustrialization and economic decline we are enjoying today here in America. Rockefeller called Chairman Mao Zedong, who slaughtered 60 million of his own people, one of the greatest leaders in history. Well, we can see the success of communist China at the expense of the American economy, as their cheap labor destroys our jobs and we buy their shit products. James Warburg, son of CFR founder Paul Warburg, delivered blunt testimony before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee on February 17, 1950. "We shall have one world government, whether we like it or not. The question is only whether world government will be achieved by conquest or consent." I can go on and on and on with further examples of the shadow government's existence. But because of a deep-rooted belief that the U.S. government is for the people and the protector of the free world, many reject the notion of an evil shadow government. When our beliefs are challenged, or when two beliefs are inconsistent with one another, cognitive dissonance is created. It's human nature to try to hold our beliefs in harmony with our worldview and to avoid disharmony or dissonance. For those of you who are having difficulty believing this information, I fully understand. For the first 40 years of my life, I would not have believed in the possibility that a shadow government could exist. Then in 2007, while in a hotel room on a business trip in Albany, New York, I saw Aaron Russo's Freedom to Fascism about the Federal Reserve fraud on Access Television. That got me thinking, and the next night I saw Loose Change, which caused a paradigm shift in my thinking. Then I discovered the Infowars.com COINTELPRO operation. I must admit I was hooked on Alex Jones. Then, fortunately, good friends like Sherry Kane, Len Horowitz, Barbara Hartwell, Chris Freedom Flowers, and others opened my eyes to his deceptions and his agenda and fear-mongering propaganda. Since my awakening, I've gone fully down the rabbit hole, spending many, many hundreds of hours of independent research on the New World Order. What I present here is true, but don't believe me. Find your own truth. There is only one truth. Seek, and you'll find it. For more truth, subscribe to Freedom First Films on YouTube and Truth Talk News on livestream.com.